The blizzard came down like the wrath of God himself, and Hayes Zimmerman knew he was a damned fool for being out in it. But the horses needed shelter, and a rancher did not abandon his animals no matter what hell the Texas sky threw down upon him. He pulled his scarf tighter around his face, the wind biting through every layer of wool and leather he wore. The February storm of 1881 was the worst he had seen in his 32 years, and that was saying something considering he had lived through some brutal winters in the Panhandle. His ranch sat 5 miles north of Llano, Texas, far enough from town that he might as well have been alone in the world most days. That was how he preferred it, truth be told. After Martha died 3 years back from the fever, he found little use for company or conversation. The ranch was his life now, the cattle and horses his only companions aside from his old dog Rex, who was probably curled up by the fire in the house right about now, smart enough to stay indoors. Hayes squinted through the white curtain of snow, making out the dark shapes of his horses huddled near the fence line. He counted them by memory more than sight. All accounted for, thank the Lord. He turned to head back toward the barn when something caught his eye, a shape that did not belong among the sage and mesquite. At first, he thought it might be a calf that had wandered from the herd, but as he urged his horse closer, his heart seized in his chest. It was a person, curled in the snow, barely visible under a dusting of white. Hayes swung down from his saddle before his horse even stopped moving, his boots sinking into the deep drift. He stumbled forward, dropping to his knees beside the figure. Small, slight, wearing clothes far too thin for this weather. He brushed snow from what turned out to be a young woman's face, pale as death, lips blue, eyes closed. For a terrible moment he thought she was gone, but then he saw the faintest cloud of breath escape her mouth. "Jesus Christ," he muttered, peeling off his heavy coat and wrapping it around her. She was light as a child when he lifted her, though he could see she was a grown woman, just terribly thin, starved by the looks of it. Her cheekbones stood out sharp against her skin, and when he held her against his chest, he could feel every rib through her worn dress. He managed to get back on his horse while holding her, no easy feat, and turned the animal toward home. The wind fought him every step, but Hayes had been born stubborn. The ranch house appeared through the snow like a blessed vision, lamplight glowing in the window where he had left it burning. He practically fell through the door, kicking it shut behind him against the wind. Rex jumped up from his place by the fire, barking in confusion at the bundle in his master's arms. Hayes carried the woman straight to the bedroom, his bedroom, the only one in the small house, and laid her on the bed. Her skin was like ice when he touched her face. He needed to get her warm and fast, or she would not make it through the night. He stoked the fire in the bedroom hearth until it roared, then turned his attention back to the woman. Her clothes were soaked through, frozen in places. He hesitated only a moment before beginning to remove them. Modesty be damned. She would die if he left her in wet clothes. He worked quickly, averting his eyes as much as possible, replacing each sodden garment with warm blankets from the chest at the foot of the bed. She did not stir once during the process, which worried him more than anything. When she was wrapped in every blanket he owned, Hayes sat on the edge of the bed and rubbed her hands between his, trying to bring feeling back into her frozen fingers. Her face was young. He realized now that he could see her properly in the firelight. Maybe early 20s, with dark hair that fell in tangled waves around her shoulders. Pretty, or would be if she were not half dead. Who was she? Where had she come from? There were no homesteads for miles in the direction he had found her, nothing but open range and wild country. "Come on now," he said quietly, continuing to work warmth back into her hands. "You have fought this hard to stay alive. Do not quit on me now. Hours passed. Hayes left her side only to tend the fire and heat some broth on the stove. He tried to get a little liquid past her lips, but most of it dribbled back out. Her breathing stayed shallow but steady, her heartbeat faint but present. He pulled a chair up beside the bed and settled in to wait, Rex curling up at his feet with a concerned whine. The storm raged outside, rattling the windows and howling down the chimney. Hayes found himself studying the woman's face in the firelight, wondering at her story. The calluses on her hands spoke of hard work. Her clothes, though worn, had been well made once. She wore no ring, no jewelry of any kind. A small scar marked her left eyebrow, old and faded. She had been beautiful before hunger and hardship wore her down to bone and will. Somewhere past midnight she stirred. Just a flutter of eyelids, a soft moan, but it was the most encouraging sign yet. Hayes leaned forward, touching her forehead, still too cold but warmer than before. "That's it," he encouraged. "Come back. You are safe now." Her eyes opened, just a crack. They were dark brown or maybe hazel, hard to tell in the dim light. She looked at him without comprehension, her gaze unfocused and confused. "Easy now," Hayes said gently. "You are all right. I found you in the snow. You are in my home on my ranch outside Leno. You are safe here." She tried to speak, but only a cracked whisper emerged. Hayes quickly fetched water, supporting her head while she took tiny sips. Most of the water stayed down this time. Her eyes were clearer now, moving around the room, taking in her surroundings, then coming back to rest on his face with obvious fear. "I am not going to hurt you," Hayes said firmly. "My name is Hayes Zimmerman. This is my ranch. Do you understand? You are safe here." The fear in her eyes did not entirely fade, but some of the panic eased. She tried to speak again, managed a single word. "Nathaniel." "Is that your name?" She shook her head weakly, wincing at the movement. "Brother looking for your brother Nathaniel. Is he out there too?" Hayes felt ice in his gut at the thought of another person lost in the storm. Tears leaked from the corners of her eyes. "Dead, weeks ago. Tried to find, ranch, work." The words came out barely coherent, broken by exhaustion and cold, but Hayes pieced together enough of the story. She had been looking for work after losing her brother, trying to reach somewhere, maybe his ranch or another, and had gotten caught in the storm. "What is your name?" he asked. "Nora." "Nora Atwood." "Well, Miss Atwood, you just rest now. We can talk more when you are stronger. Right now you need to sleep and get warm. I will be right here if you need anything." She nodded slightly, her eyes already closing again. Within moments she had slipped back into sleep, this time more natural than the death-like state before. Hayes released a breath he had not realized he was holding. She would make it. She was not out of danger yet, but the worst had passed. He kept watch through the night, maintaining the fire, checking her breathing, trying to get a little broth into her whenever she surfaced toward consciousness. By dawn the storm had blown itself out, leaving the world buried in white silence. Hayes finally allowed himself to sleep a few hours in the chair, trusting Rex to wake him if anything changed. When he woke, sunlight was streaming through the window, and Nora was watching him with clear eyes. She still looked terrible, pale and drawn, but alive and aware. Hayes sat up straight, working the kinks out of his neck. "Good morning," he said. "How are you feeling?" "Cold," she whispered. "Hungry. Those are good signs. Let me get you some food." He heated the broth he had made the night before and brought it to her, helping her sit up enough to eat. She was weak as a kitten, her hands shaking so badly he had to hold the cup for her, but she got several spoonfuls down. Color started creeping back into her face. "Thank you," she said when she could manage no more. "You saved my life. Anyone would have done the same." "I do not think so." "Not everyone." She studied him with those dark eyes, intelligent despite her condition. I remember you found me. I was so cold, I thought I was dying. You nearly did. How long was I out there? I do not know. I found you yesterday evening during the storm. You could have been there hours or just minutes. Hard to say. Nora closed her eyes and tears slipped down her cheeks. Nathaniel, my brother. We were coming from Houston, heading west, looking for work. We heard there were ranches hiring, but he got sick. We stopped in a town. I cannot even remember the name now. Everything became a blur. He died in 4 days. The doctor said it was his heart. I did not have money to bury him proper. The town buried him in the church cemetery for free, but I had nothing left. No money, no food, nowhere to go. So you kept traveling. What else could I do? I thought if I could reach a ranch, any ranch, I could work. I am strong. I can cook, clean, work with animals. But I ran out of food 2 days ago. Then the storm came. I tried to find shelter, but there was nothing, just endless white. I was sure I was going to die out there. I prayed for it to be quick. Hayes felt something twist in his chest. He knew loneliness, knew loss, but he had always had a roof over his head and food in his belly. You are here now. You are safe. You can stay as long as you need to recover. I cannot impose on your kindness. It is not an imposition. I live alone out here. Have for 3 years. I could use help around the place, truth be told. If you want work, I can offer it. Room and board plus wages. Nothing fancy but honest work. Nora stared at him as if he had offered her the moon. You do not know me. I could be anyone. You could say the same about me, but I figure anyone who fights as hard to survive as you did deserves a chance. What do you say? Once you are back on your feet, you can work for your keep. If it does not suit you, or if you want to move on, that is your choice, but you have a place here as long as you want it. More tears came, but these seemed different than before. I do not know what to say. Yes, thank you. I will work hard, I promise. You will not regret this. Hayes nodded, feeling awkward under the weight of her gratitude. Get some rest now. We can sort out the details later. Over the next week, Nora slowly recovered her strength. Hayes moved into the small storage room off the kitchen, giving her the bedroom for privacy. It was cramped and cold, but he made do with extra blankets and did not complain. Nora seemed mortified by the arrangement, but Hayes would not hear of her sleeping anywhere else while she was still so weak. She proved herself a determined patient, refusing to stay abed any longer than absolutely necessary. By the 3rd day, she was up and moving around, insisting on helping with small tasks despite her obvious exhaustion. By the end of the week, she was cooking meals and tidying the house, ignoring Hayes's protests that she needed more time to recover. I will not be a burden, she said firmly when he tried to get her to sit down and rest. You have already done so much for me. The least I can do is earn my keep. Hayes learned quickly that arguing with Nora Atwood was a losing proposition. She had a stubborn streak a mile wide hidden under that quiet demeanor. So he let her help where she insisted, keeping a close eye to make sure she did not overdo it. Rex became her devoted shadow, following her from room to room, seeming to sense she needed protection. As Nora regained her strength, the house began to transform. Hayes had let things go after Martha died, keeping only the basics clean and functional. But Nora brought a different energy to the space. Curtains that had hung limp and dusty for years were washed and rehung. Windows sparkled. The floor was scrubbed until the wood shone. Meals became something more than beans and bacon. She had a gift for making much out of little, creating soups and stews that filled the house with warmth and good smells. They fell into a routine. Hayes worked the ranch during the day, tending cattle, mending fences, breaking ice off the water troughs in the still bitter cold. Nora managed the house, and once she was strong enough, began helping with the livestock closer to home, feeding the chickens, collecting eggs, milking the cow. Evenings they spent by the fire, Hayes doing small repair work or reviewing his accounts, Nora mending clothes or reading from the small collection of books he owned. They talked during those evenings, tentative at first, then with growing ease. Hayes learned that Nora was 23, born in Louisiana, orphaned young, raised by her older brother who had worked as a printer in Houston. Nathaniel had been 30 when he died, never married, devoted to taking care of his little sister. They had been close, the two of them against the world. His death had shattered her world completely. Hayes told her about his own life, growing up on a ranch in East Texas, coming out to Llano 15 years ago to start his own spread. His marriage to Martha, the daughter of a neighboring rancher, a good woman who deserved better than to die young from a fever that swept through the region one brutal summer. They had never had children, though they had wanted them. After she died, Hayes threw himself into the work of the ranch, finding purpose in the endless cycle of cattle and seasons. "You ever get lonely out here?" Nora asked one evening, looking up from the sock she was darning. Hayes considered the question. "I got used to it. After Martha died, I found I preferred my own company. People in town kept trying to fix me up with their daughters or sisters, like a man cannot exist without a wife. Got tired of it. Out here, nobody bothers me about it. It is a hard life for anyone alone." "Is that why you and your brother were traveling together? So you would not be alone, partly. But also, what choice did I have? A woman alone is not safe. At least with Nathaniel I had protection, someone who cared what happened to me. Now." She trailed off, returning her attention to her mending. "Now you have a place here," Hayes said, "for as long as you want it." She looked at him with an expression he could not quite read. "You are a good man, Hayes Zimmerman, better than most I have known." Something in the way she said it made his chest feel tight. He cleared his throat and went back to the bridle he was repairing, trying to ignore the warmth spreading through him that had nothing to do with the fire. As February turned to March, the worst of the winter released its grip. The snow melted, leaving the ground muddy and thick. Nora continued to strengthen, the sharp angles of starvation softening as regular meals and hard work built her back to health. Hayes found himself noticing things he should not notice, the way lamplight caught gold in her dark hair, how her laugh sounded like music when Rex did something foolish, the grace of her hands as she worked. He tried not to notice. She was an employee, a woman under his protection. She had been through hell and needed stability and safety, not her employer developing feelings that had no place in their arrangement. But his heart did not seem to care about propriety or good sense. March brought the first real signs of spring and a visit from Thomas Grant, who owned the neighboring ranch 10 miles south. Thomas was a good man, fair and honest, though he liked to talk considerably more than Hayes ever did. He arrived one afternoon leading a pack horse loaded with supplies. "Figured I would check on you after that monster storm," Thomas called out as he dismounted. "Thought you might be running low on stores, so I brought extra from my last trip to town." "I appreciate it," Hayes said, though he had been planning to make the trip himself in a few days. Still, he would not turn down Thomas's generosity. "Come on in. Coffee is hot." Thomas followed him into the house, talking about the storm damage on his spread, cattle losses, fences down, the usual spring complaints. He stopped mid-sentence when Nora appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "Well now," Thomas said, his eyebrows climbing. "Hayes, you have been holding out on me." "This is Miss Nora Atwood," Hayes said, his tone slightly defensive without meaning it to be. "She works for me." "Nora, this is Thomas Grant. He runs the ranch to the south." "Pleased to meet you," Nora said politely, offering her hand. Thomas shook it with more enthusiasm than necessary. Hayes thought sourly. "The pleasure is all mine, Miss Atwood. I had no idea Hayes had hired help. This is wonderful. A house needs a woman's touch." "Just offering a job to someone who needed one," Hayes said. "Coffee." They sat around the kitchen table, Thomas doing most of the talking as usual, but Hayes noticed the man's attention kept drifting to Nora. She was polite but quiet, answering questions about where she was from but volunteering little else. Hayes found himself grateful for her reserve. He did not like the way Thomas was looking at her, too interested, too speculative. After Thomas left, promising to visit again soon, Nora started preparing dinner while Hayes brought in firewood. "He seems nice," Nora said carefully. "Thomas is a good neighbor." He was very friendly. Something in her tone made Hayes look at her sharply. "Too friendly," she shrugged. "Just friendly. I am not used to much attention from people. After Nathaniel died, most folks in that town looked at me like I was a problem to be solved or avoided. Mr. Grant seemed genuinely kind. He is kind. He is also a widower with 3 young children and probably looking for a new wife. Just so you know." Nora paused in her chopping of vegetables. "Oh, I see. Not saying he has bad intentions, just saying. I understand. Thank you for the warning." She resumed her work, but Hayes caught a small smile playing at the corner of her mouth. "What?" "Nothing. Just, you sounded almost jealous just then." "I did not. I was just stating facts. Of course. My mistake." Hayes muttered something and went back outside, his ears burning. Damn woman was too observant by half, and damn him for being so transparent. Thomas proved as good as his word, finding excuses to visit far more frequently than he ever had before. Each time he brought something, supplies, news from town, a newspaper, fresh produce from his greenhouse. Always polite, always friendly, always spending just a little too much time talking to Nora in Hayes's opinion. Not that he had any right to an opinion. Nora was free to do as she pleased. If she was interested in Thomas, that was her business. But she did not seem particularly interested, Hayes was relieved to note. She was polite but distant, friendly but not encouraging. Thomas did not seem to notice or did not care, continuing his regular visits. Hayes bore it with as much grace as he could muster, which was to say not much. "You could just tell him you are not interested," Hayes said one evening after Thomas had left following yet another visit. Nora looked up from her sewing. "Tell who I am not interested in what, Thomas? You could tell him you are not interested in courting. He has not asked to court me. He is just being friendly. Nora, the man is not riding 20 miles round trip to be friendly, he is interested." She set down her sewing, meeting his eyes directly. "And if he is, would that bother you?" Hayes opened his mouth and closed it again. "Would it bother him?" Hell yes, it would bother him, but he had no right to say so. "I just do not want you to feel pressured. You work for me. If his attention makes you uncomfortable, I can speak to him." "His attention does not make me uncomfortable, but I am not interested in Thomas Grant, friendly as he is. I am not interested in any man right now. I am still finding my feet, figuring out my life. Romance is the last thing on my mind." Hayes nodded, ignoring the complicated mix of relief and disappointment churning in his gut. Relief that she was not interested in Thomas. Disappointment that she was not interested in any man, which presumably included him. Not that he had any business being interested in her either. She was too young, too vulnerable, too much his responsibility to even think about in those terms. But he did think about it. More and more as spring deepened into early summer. He thought about it when he saw her in the garden she had planted, coaxing vegetables from the hard Texas soil. He thought about it when she laughed at something Rex did, her whole face lighting up with joy. He thought about it at night in his cramped storage room, imagining what it would be like to have the right to hold her, to kiss her, to wake up beside her in the morning. It was torture of his own making, and he knew it. May brought the start of branding season, hard work that left Hayes exhausted and sore at the end of each day. Nora helped where she could, cooking for the extra hands Hayes hired from town, keeping them supplied with food and water, even helping with the calves when they were short-handed. She proved herself fearless and capable, earning the respect of the hired men through sheer determination and competence. One evening after a particularly long day, Hayes came back to the house to find Nora sitting on the porch steps, staring out at the sunset. He sat down beside her, too tired to bother with a chair. "Long day," he observed. "They are all long days," she agreed. "But good days, honest days. You have taken to ranch life well, better than most folks would. I like it. I like the work, the rhythm of it. I like knowing what needs to be done and doing it. In Houston, everything felt uncertain, always scraping by, always worried about the next meal or the rent. Here, it is hard work, but it feels secure. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to purple. Rex dozed at their feet. Hayes was acutely aware of how close Nora was sitting, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her shoulder almost touching his. "Hayes," she said softly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "You ever think about your wife, about Martha?" The question surprised him. They had not talked much about Martha beyond the initial telling of her story. "I do. Not as much as I used to, which makes me feel guilty sometimes, but time moves on whether we want it to or not. The grief is not as sharp as it was. I think about Nathaniel every day. Sometimes it feels like I can barely remember what he looked like, and that terrifies me. What if I forget him completely?" Hayes understood that fear too well. "You will not forget. The details might fade, but the important things stay. The way they made you feel, the things they taught you, the love you shared, that does not fade. I hope you are right." She leaned her head on his shoulder, a gesture so natural and trusting it made his breath catch. "Thank you. For everything. For saving me, for giving me work, for giving me a home. I was so lost when you found me, not just physically, though God knows I was that too, but lost in every way. You gave me a reason to keep going." Hayes did not trust himself to speak. He sat very still, not wanting to disturb her head on his shoulder, feeling like anything he said would shatter the moment. Finally, he managed. "You gave me something too. This house feels like a home again, not just a place I sleep. You brought light back into it." Nora lifted her head to look at him, her face very close to his in the fading light. For a moment Hayes thought she might kiss him, or maybe he might kiss her, but then Rex barked at something in the distance and the spell broke. Nora stood quickly, brushing off her skirt. "I should start supper," she said, her voice slightly breathless. "Right, yes, I will wash up." Hayes sat there a moment longer after she went inside, his heart pounding. That had been close, too close. He needed to get himself under control before he did something stupid and ruined the best thing that had happened to him in years. But controlling his feelings proved easier said than done. June brought blazing heat and the hard work of summer, moving cattle to better grazing, maintaining the windmill and wells, endless fence repair. Hayes worked himself to exhaustion trying to burn off the constant awareness of Nora, but it did not help. If anything, coming home exhausted and finding dinner waiting, finding her smile and her conversation and her presence, just made him fall harder. She was everywhere in his life now, woven into every aspect of his days. She tended the garden that fed them. She cared for the chickens whose eggs they ate. She mended the clothes he wore and cooked the food he ate and kept the house that sheltered them both. More than that, she was becoming his friend, his confidant, the person he most wanted to talk to at the end of each day. The thought of her leaving, of this being temporary, made him feel hollow. July brought a heat wave that baked the land hard as brick and shortened everyone's temper. Even Rex spent most of his time sleeping in whatever shade he could find. Hayes was fixing the windmill one afternoon, working in the blazing sun because the cattle needed water, when he saw a rider approaching. He recognized Thomas Grant's horse with a mix of irritation and resignation. Thomas dismounted, looking wilted from the heat. "Afternoon, Hayes." "Hot enough for you. What brings you out in this?" "Actually, I came to talk to you about something specific." Thomas glanced toward the house, where Nora was hanging laundry. "About Miss Atwood." Hayes felt his jaw tighten. "What about her?" "I wanted to ask your permission to court her properly. I know she works for you, so it felt right to speak with you first. I have been considering it for some time, and I think she would make an excellent wife. My children need a mother, and she is clearly capable and kind. I am prepared to offer her marriage if she is amenable." Every word felt like a punch to Hayes's gut. He wanted to tell Thomas no, to send him packing, to forbid him from coming anywhere near Nora. But what right did he have? None at all. "It is not my decision to make," Hayes said, his voice coming out rougher than intended. "Nora is her own woman. If you want to court her, ask her, not me. But as her employer, your opinion matters. I would not want to cause problems. There will be no problems from me. Like I said, it is her choice." Thomas smiled, clearly taking that as encouragement. "Excellent. I will speak with her today then. Thank you, Hayes. I hope this means we will be family soon, neighbors connected by marriage." Hayes made a non-committal sound and watched Thomas walk toward where Nora was working. He saw them talk, saw Thomas gesturing earnestly, saw Nora's surprised expression. He could not hear the conversation, but he saw enough. After a few minutes, Thomas tipped his hat and headed back to his horse, looking disappointed. Nora stood there a moment, then picked up her laundry basket and went inside. Hayes finished with the windmill, taking more time than necessary, trying to compose himself before going inside. When he finally entered the house, he found Nora starting dinner, her movements brisk and efficient. "Thomas talked to you," he said. "Not a question." He did. Nora did not look up from the vegetables she was chopping. And I told him I was flattered but not interested. I told him I was not looking to marry anyone right now, that I was happy with my life as it is." Hayes felt relief flood through him, followed immediately by guilt. He should want Nora to be happy, even if that happiness did not include him. "He is a good man, good offer. I know. But I do not love him. I barely know him. And I am not interested in being a mother to 3 children or a wife to a man I feel nothing for, no matter how good he is." "So you are staying?" Nora finally looked at him, her eyes searching his face. "If you will still have me." "Unless you think I should go. Do you want me to accept Thomas? Is that what you are trying to say?" "No, God, no. I just want you to be happy, whatever that means." "What would make me happy," she said slowly, carefully, "is to stay here, working for you, living this life. If that is still acceptable." "It is more than acceptable." The words came out too fervent, too revealing, but Hayes could not help it. Something shifted in Nora's expression, a softness that made his heart race. "Good. Then that is settled. Now set the table. Dinner will be ready soon." Hayes did as he was told, feeling like he had dodged some kind of bullet without quite understanding how. Thomas did not visit again after that, apparently taking Nora's rejection as final. The summer rolled on, hot and dry, testing everyone's patience and the limits of the water supply. But inside the ranch house, there was a new awareness between Hayes and Nora, a tension that was not entirely unpleasant but made everything feel charged with possibility. They moved around each other carefully, neither quite willing to break the delicate balance they had achieved. Hayes caught Nora watching him sometimes when she thought he was not looking. He knew she caught him doing the same. Their hands brushed when passing dishes at dinner. They sat closer together on the porch in the evenings. Small touches, small moments, building toward something neither seemed quite brave enough to name. August brought a brief respite from the heat with a series of thunderstorms that dumped much-needed rain across the parched land. Hayes and Nora stood on the porch watching one particularly spectacular storm roll in, the wind whipping her hair around her face, lightning splitting the purple sky. "It is beautiful," Nora said, nearly shouting over the thunder. "It is dangerous. We should go inside." "Not yet. I love storms. The power of them, the wildness. It makes you remember you are alive." A gust of wind drove rain onto the porch, soaking them both. Nora laughed, spreading her arms wide and tilting her face to the sky. Hayes watched her, this woman who had come to him half dead in the snow and now stood full of life and joy in the storm. Something in him snapped, some restraint he had been holding on to for months. "Nora." She turned to him, rain streaming down her face, her eyes bright. "I cannot do this anymore." Her smile faltered. "Do what?" "Pretend I do not feel what I feel. Pretend you are just my employee, just a woman I helped. I am in love with you. I think I have been since those first weeks when you bullied yourself out of bed to cook and clean because you could not stand to be a burden. I love your strength and your stubbornness and your laugh and your kindness. I love the way you transformed this house into a home. I love you, and I know I should not say it. I know it is not fair to you given that you work for me and you came here because you had nowhere else to go, but I cannot keep it inside anymore. I love you." Nora stared at him, rain dripping from her hair, her chest rising and falling quickly. Then she closed the distance between them in 2 steps and kissed him. Her hands tangled in his wet shirt, pulling him down to her level, and Hayes wrapped his arms around her waist, kissing her back with months of pent-up longing. She tasted like rain and hope and home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nora kept her hands on his chest. "You foolish man. Did you really not know? I have been in love with you for months. I thought you were not interested. You never said anything, never gave any sign. I convinced myself you still loved your wife too much to ever see me as anything but hired help. I will always love Martha. She was my wife. But she is gone, and life goes on, and you, Nora, you brought me back to life. I thought you could not possibly feel the same. You are young and beautiful and could have anyone. Why would you want a weathered rancher who barely knows how to talk to people anymore? Because you are good and kind and honest. Because you saved my life and asked nothing in return. Because you make me feel safe and valued and seen. Because coming home to you at the end of every day is the best part of my day. Because I love you, Hayes Zimmerman, and I think I have since the moment I woke up and saw you sitting beside my bed, watching over me like some kind of guardian angel." Hayes kissed her again, slower this time, savoring the reality of holding her, of knowing she felt the same impossible thing he felt. The storm raged around them, but they stood sheltered on the porch, wrapped in each other, finally honest about what had been building between them for months. When they finally went inside, soaked to the bone and shivering despite the warm night, Nora put water on to boil for tea while Hayes built up the fire. They changed into dry clothes and sat together on the couch, closer than they had ever allowed themselves before, Nora tucked under Hayes's arm. "So what now?" she asked. "Now I court you properly, take you to town for dinner, go on walks, do all the things a man should do when he is trying to win a woman's heart. You already have my heart. Then I will work to keep it. And when enough time has passed that no one can say we rushed into things, I will ask you to marry me, if that is something you might want." Nora tilted her face up to look at him. "It is something I definitely want, but I do not need a long courtship to be sure of my feelings. I already know." But I want to do this right. You deserve that. What I deserve is to be happy, and you make me happy. But I understand. We can take our time, do things properly. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire, listening to the rain hammer the roof. Rex, who had been hiding under the bed during the storm, emerged and climbed onto the couch with them, wedging himself between them with a contented groan. "I think he approves," Nora said, scratching behind the dog's ears. "He loved you before I did. He has good taste. He is a very smart dog." Hayes laughed, feeling lighter than he had in years. Everything had changed and nothing had changed. Nora was still here, still part of his daily life, but now he could hold her hand, kiss her whenever he wanted, tell her he loved her. It felt like a miracle, like a gift he had done nothing to deserve. September brought cooler weather and preparations for winter. Hayes took Nora to town for the first time, wanting to buy her proper dresses and supplies before the cold weather set in. He also wanted to show her off, to let the town see that Hayes Zimmerman was courting someone, so there would be no surprise when he eventually asked her to marry him. Lano was a small town, maybe 200 people, with a main street that held a general store, a saloon, a church, a bank, and a handful of other businesses. Everyone knew everyone else's business, and Hayes and Nora's arrival together caused a considerable stir. Hayes ignored the stares and whispers, leading Nora into the general store with his hand on the small of her back. Mrs. Patterson, who ran the store with her husband, bustled over immediately. "Hayes Zimmerman, as I live and breathe. I heard rumors you had a woman staying out at your place, but I did not believe them. And who is this lovely young lady?" "This is Miss Nora Atwood." "Nora, Mrs. Patterson. Pleasure to meet you, dear. How did you end up at Hayes's ranch? He is about as social as a hermit." Nora smiled. "He found me lost in that big snowstorm back in February. I was half frozen. He saved my life and offered me work. I have been working at his ranch ever since." "Well, is that not just like Hayes? Always helping people, never asking for anything in return. Are you just working for him, or is there more to the story?" "Margaret, leave them alone," Mr. Patterson called from behind the counter. "Let them shop in peace." Mrs. Patterson ignored her husband, her eyes sharp with curiosity. "You two make a handsome couple, I will say that." "We are courting," Hayes said firmly, wanting to make it clear. "Now we need to buy some supplies and some dresses for Nora. Can you help with that?" Mrs. Patterson's eyes lit up. Helping dress a young woman was clearly more exciting than almost anything else that happened in Leno. Of course. Come with me, dear. Let us see what we have that might work." She swept Nora off to the back of the store, leaving Hayes with Mr. Patterson to discuss less interesting matters like flour and coffee and ammunition. By the time Hayes had arranged for all his supplies to be loaded onto his wagon, Nora emerged from the back wearing a new dark green dress that made her eyes look almost golden. She looked beautiful and uncomfortable in equal measure. "It fits perfectly," Mrs. Patterson declared. "And we picked out 3 more dresses, plus undergarments and a proper coat for winter. Your young man is taking excellent care of you." "He is very generous," Nora agreed, catching Hayes's eye with an expression that clearly said they would discuss this later. Hayes paid for everything without complaint, ignoring Nora's whispered protests that it was too much. She needed proper clothes, especially with winter coming, and he had the money. More than that, he wanted to do this for her, to give her something after all she had been through. They ate dinner at the small restaurant next to the saloon, enduring more curious stares and a few bold enough to approach their table with questions. Hayes kept his answers short and polite, but made it clear that his relationship with Nora was serious and respectable. By the time they left town, Hayes was certain that everyone within 50 miles would know he was courting someone within the week. That was exhausting, Nora said as they headed out of town. Small town life. Everyone in everyone else's business. You do not come to town much, do you? Not if I can help it. I prefer the ranch. I can understand why, though Mrs. Patterson was nice, even if she was incredibly nosy. She means well. Most of them do, they just do not have much excitement in their lives, so anyone's personal business becomes entertainment. They rode in comfortable silence for a while before Nora said, "Thank you for the dresses. They are beautiful, but it was too much money." "It was not too much. You need proper clothes. I should have taken you to town months ago, but I kept putting it off." "Why?" Hayes glanced at her, then back at the road. "I guess I was afraid if I introduced you to more people, showed you what else was out there, you might decide ranch life was not what you wanted, or someone else might catch your eye. Stupid, I know. Not stupid, but unnecessary. I was not looking for anything else. I already had everything I wanted right where I was." Hayes reached over and took her hand, lacing their fingers together. They rode the rest of the way home like that, hands linked, the wagon rattling over the dusty road, the sun setting behind them in shades of orange and red. Fall passed in a blur of work and quiet happiness. Hayes taught Nora to ride better, and they spent evenings exploring the ranch together on horseback. She proved a natural rider once she got over her initial nervousness, and they ranged across his land watching the sunset, checking on cattle, just enjoying being together. Hayes had never been one for grand romantic gestures, but he tried in small ways to show Nora what she meant to him. Wildflowers left on the kitchen table, her favorite foods cooked when it was his turn to make dinner. A new book he bought on his next trip to town because she mentioned wanting to read it. Nora did the same, finding little ways to show her love. His clothes always mended before he noticed they needed it. His coffee made exactly how he liked it every morning. A new shirt she sewed for him from fabric she bought with her wages, presenting it shyly on his birthday in October. They kissed often, held hands, sat close together, but took things no further. Hayes was old-fashioned enough to want to wait for marriage, and Nora seemed to respect that boundary even if she sometimes tested it. More than once they found themselves on the couch kissing with an intensity that made Hayes's head spin, and he had to pull back, breathing hard, reminding himself to take things slow. "I love you," he would say, holding her face in his hands. "I love you too," she would reply. "But you are testing my patience, Hayes Zimmerman. Just a little longer, I promise." November brought the first cold snaps, reminding Hayes of how he had found Nora almost a year ago. It seemed impossible that she had only been in his life for 9 months. It felt like she had always been there, like he could not remember what life was like before her. On a cold evening in late November, almost exactly a year before the storm that brought them together, Hayes decided he had waited long enough. He rode into town alone while Nora was working in the garden, going to the jeweler who also worked as the town watchmaker. Mr. Chen was Chinese, one of the few who had stayed in Texas after working on the railroad, and he did beautiful work. "I need a ring," Hayes told him. "Wedding ring." Simple but nice. Mr. Chen smiled, the wrinkles around his eyes deepening. "For the young lady you brought to town, Miss Atwood." "Yes, she is lovely. You are a lucky man. Let me show you what I have." Hayes looked at several options before settling on a simple gold band with a small blue stone set into it. "This one. It reminds me of her eyes in certain light." "Excellent choice. When is the wedding?" "I have not asked her yet. Doing that tonight. She will say yes." "Anyone can see how much she loves you. Good luck, my friend." Hayes rode home with the ring in his pocket, nervous in a way he had not been since he was a young man courting Martha. But this felt different. He was older now, more sure of himself and what he wanted. And what he wanted was Nora for the rest of his life. He found her in the kitchen preparing dinner, her hair pinned up in a way that showed her neck. Rex dozed by the fire. Everything looked so normal, so domestic, so perfect. Hayes took a deep breath. "Nora, can you come outside for a minute?" She looked up, surprised. "Now, dinner is almost ready. It can wait. Please?" Something in his voice must have told her this was important. She wiped her hands on her apron and followed him outside. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and purple. Hayes led her to the porch where they had stood in the storm that night he first told her he loved her. "You remember standing here," he said, "in the rain, when everything changed between us." "Of course I remember. It was one of the best nights of my life." "Mine too." "Nora, I know we have not been courting that long by traditional standards. It has only been a few months, but I have loved you longer than that. I loved you when I did not have the courage to say it. And the truth is, I knew almost from the beginning that you were special, that you were going to matter to me. I have wasted enough time pretending otherwise." Hayes pulled the ring from his pocket, dropping to one knee on the porch. Nora's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes going wide. "Nora Atwood, you came into my life when I was just existing, not really living. You brought warmth and light and joy back into this house and into my heart. You make me want to be better, to do better, to build a real future instead of just going through the motions. I love you more than I have words to say. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my love for whatever time we have left on this earth?" Tears streamed down Nora's face. "Yes, yes, of course, yes. I would marry you tonight if I could. Yes, Hayes. Yes to everything." Hayes slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the love and relief and joy flooding through him. She kissed him back with equal fervor, laughing and crying at the same time. "I love you," she said between kisses. "I love you so much. I was beginning to think you would never ask. I wanted to do it right. I wanted you to be sure. I have been sure since the first time you held my hand while I was dying in your bed, telling me everything would be all right. I have been sure since you gave me work when you owed me nothing. I have been sure since 100 small kindnesses that you thought nothing of but meant everything to me. I have been sure, Hayes. I have been waiting for you to be sure. I am sure. I have never been more sure of anything." They stood on the porch holding each other as the sun set, both crying happy tears, Rex emerging from inside to dance around their feet in confusion at all the emotion. Finally, Nora pulled back, wiping her eyes. "We should tell people. Plan a wedding. When should we get married?" "Whenever you want. Next week if you can arrange it. I do not want a long engagement." Nora laughed. "Then neither do I. Let us go to town tomorrow and talk to Pastor Williams. If he can do it, let us get married this month, before winter really sets in, before anything else can happen. I want to be your wife, Hayes. I do not want to wait. December wedding it is then." They went back inside, dinner forgotten for the moment, making plans and dreaming about their future together. Hayes sent word to town the next day, and Pastor Williams agreed to marry them the second Saturday in December. Nora sewed herself a wedding dress with help from Mrs. Patterson, simple but beautiful in cream-colored fabric that made her look like an angel. Hayes bought a new suit and tried not to be too nervous. They invited Thomas Grant to show there were no hard feelings, and he came with his children, seeming genuinely happy for them. Most of the town showed up, curious to see Hayes Zimmerman finally remarry after 3 years alone. The ceremony took place in the small church, with winter sunlight streaming through the windows. Nora walked down the aisle without anyone to give her away, her head held high, her eyes locked on Hayes waiting for her at the altar. She had never looked more beautiful to him, and when she reached his side and took his hands, Hayes felt his heart settle into a peace he had not known since before Martha died. Pastor Williams kept the ceremony short and sweet, knowing neither Hayes nor Nora were much for long speeches. They exchanged simple vows, promising to love and honor each other for the rest of their lives. Hayes slipped a second ring onto Nora's finger to match her engagement ring, and she placed a simple gold band on his. When Pastor Williams pronounced them husband and wife and told Hayes he could kiss his bride, Hayes did so thoroughly, not caring that the whole town was watching. This was his wife, his love, his Nora, and he wanted everyone to know it. The town put on a reception at the church hall, everyone bringing food and drinks to celebrate. Hayes and Nora stayed for a few hours, accepting congratulations and well wishes before finally escaping back to their ranch, their home, their life together. That night, finally married, finally able to express their love fully, Hayes carried Nora over the threshold of their bedroom. They made love slowly, tenderly, learning each other in the way of new lovers who have all the time in the world. Afterward, lying tangled together in the bed where he had once nursed her back to life, Hayes held Nora close and thanked God for the storm that brought her to him. "What are you thinking?" Nora asked, tracing patterns on his chest. "That I am the luckiest man alive. That you are the best thing that ever happened to me, that I cannot wait to spend the rest of my life with you. I feel the same, all of it." She propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. "Hayes, do you think maybe we could have what you and Martha did not get to have, a family? You want children, I do, someday. Not right away, but someday. Is that something you would want?" Hayes thought about it, imagining Nora around with his child, imagining little ones running around the ranch. It had been a dream he had given up on after Martha died. "Yes. I think I would like that very much." "Good." Nora settled back against his chest with a contented sigh. "Then we have so much to look forward to, our whole lives together." "Our whole lives," Hayes agreed, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. They fell asleep wrapped in each other, warm and safe and loved, while outside the winter wind blew cold across the Texas plains. The first year of their marriage passed in contentment and hard work. Nora threw herself into making the ranch prosper, taking on more responsibility with the livestock and the land. She proved to have a good head for business, suggesting improvements that Hayes implemented with good results. The ranch grew more profitable under their joint management, enough that Hayes was able to hire more help and expand the herd. Thomas Grant became a good friend to them both, often stopping by with his children who adored Nora and begged her to tell them stories. Any awkwardness from Thomas's earlier interest faded away, and eventually he began courting a widow from town, bringing her to meet Hayes and Nora for their approval. They gave it gladly, happy to see Thomas find someone to care for, true to her word, Mrs. Patterson became a frequent visitor as well, bringing news from town and often staying for lunch. She took Nora under her wing in the way of older women who never had daughters, teaching her how to preserve foods, sharing recipes, gossiping about the town in a way that was somehow warm rather than mean. Life settled into a rhythm of seasons and work, of love and partnership. Hayes had never been happier. Coming home to Nora every night, waking beside her every morning, working alongside her during the day, it was everything he had not dared hope for after Martha died. And Nora bloomed under the security and love he provided, growing more confident and vibrant with each passing month. In the summer of 1882, a year and a half after they married, Nora told Hayes she was pregnant. He swept her into his arms, spinning her around despite her laughing protests, overcome with joy. They spent that evening making plans, Hayes already building a cradle in his mind, Nora already sewing baby clothes from soft fabric she had been saving. The pregnancy was not easy. Nora suffered through morning sickness that lasted most of the day, and the Texas heat that summer was brutal. But she never complained, even when Hayes fussed over her constantly, trying to make sure she did not overwork herself. She tolerated his hovering with good humor, only putting her foot down when he tried to suggest she stay in bed all day. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time while still working," she told him firmly. "I am pregnant, not dying. I will rest when I need to, but I am not going to spend 9 months in bed." Hayes learned to back off, though he never stopped worrying. Mrs. Patterson came to stay for the last month of the pregnancy, giving Hayes a bit of peace of mind knowing there was another woman there to help if anything went wrong. She and Nora spent long hours talking and preparing, becoming close in the way women do when sharing such an important experience. In late February of 1883, almost exactly 2 years after Hayes had found Nora in the snow, she went into labor. It was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Hayes paced the hallway outside their bedroom, feeling helpless while Mrs. Patterson and the doctor from town tended to Nora. Her screams tore at his heart, making him want to break down the door and do something, anything to help. But there was nothing he could do except wait and pray. Finally, as dawn broke on the second day, he heard the thin wail of a newborn. Minutes later, Mrs. Patterson emerged from the bedroom, smiling despite her exhaustion. "You have a son, Hayes, a healthy baby boy, and Nora is doing well. She is exhausted but fine. You can go in now." Hayes did not remember crossing the hall. Suddenly he was just there in the bedroom, moving to Nora's side. She looked pale and tired but radiant, holding a small bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. When she looked up at him, her eyes were full of tears and joy. "Meet your son," she said softly. Hayes looked down at the tiny red face peeking out from the blanket, at the small fists waving weakly, at the shock of dark hair on his head. His son. His and Nora's. A wave of love so powerful it nearly knocked him over washed through him. "He is perfect," Hayes managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. "You are perfect. Thank you for him, for everything." "What should we name him?" Nora asked. They had discussed names, but nothing had felt quite right. Now, looking at his son, Hayes knew. "Nathan." "For your brother." "Nathan Henry Zimmerman." More tears spilled down Nora's cheeks. "Nathaniel would have loved that." "Nathan." "Yes, that is perfect." Hayes sat carefully on the edge of the bed, putting his arm around Nora's shoulders, looking down at their son together. Nathan made small snuffling sounds, his eyes trying to open and focus. Hayes touched one tiny hand with his finger, and Nathan's fist immediately closed around it with surprising strength. "He has a good grip," Hayes said, amazed. "He is strong, like his father. And stubborn like his mother, no doubt." Nora laughed softly, leaning her head on Hayes's shoulder. "No doubt. Poor child does not stand a chance with us as parents. He is going to have a good life, I swear it. We will give him everything. Love, security, a home where he is wanted and valued." "We will," Nora agreed. "Together." Mrs. Patterson eventually shooed Hayes out so Nora could rest and try to feed the baby. Hayes went outside, needing to process everything that had just happened. He walked to the place where he had found Nora 2 years ago, now green with spring grass instead of white with snow. It seemed impossible that so much had changed in such a short time. 2 years ago he had been alone, going through the motions of living without really being alive. Now he had a wife he adored and a newborn son. He had a family again. He had everything. "Thank you," he said to the empty sky, to God or fate or whatever force had brought Nora to him on that frozen night. "Thank you for giving me another chance. I will not waste it." He went back to the house, back to his wife and son, back to the life they would build together. Nathan proved to be a healthy, happy baby, and Nora took to motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything else. Hayes discovered a capacity for love he had not known he possessed, finding himself completely undone by his son's toothless smiles and tiny fingers wrapping around his own. He would sit for hours just watching Nathan sleep, marveling that this perfect small human was his. The ranch continued to prosper. Hayes hired more help so he could spend more time with his family. They added on to the house, building a proper nursery for Nathan and an extra bedroom for future children. Life was full and rich and good. When Nathan was a year old, Nora told Hayes she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and in the spring of 1884 they welcomed a daughter, Grace Martha Zimmerman, named for Hayes's first wife. Nora had suggested it, wanting to honor the woman who had come before her, who Hayes had loved first. Hayes loved her even more for the generosity of that gesture. Grace was different from Nathan, quieter and more serious, studying the world with solemn blue eyes. Nathan, now walking and getting into everything, was fascinated by his baby sister, always wanting to help care for her under his parents' watchful supervision. The years rolled on, full of work and love and the chaos of raising children. Nathan grew into a strong, curious boy with his mother's stubbornness and his father's quiet strength. Grace proved to have her mother's intelligence and her father's way with animals. They added 2 more children to the family, Robert in 1886 and Sarah in 1888, completing their family of 6. The ranch became known as one of the most successful in the region, but more than that, it became known as a place of warmth and welcome. Nora always had food for travelers passing through, and Hayes often gave work to men down on their luck, remembering how he had given Nora a chance when she needed it most. They were active in the church and the community, raising their children to be kind and generous and aware of how blessed they were. Thomas Grant remained a close friend, eventually remarrying as Hayes and Nora had hoped. His children and theirs grew up together, running between the 2 ranches, as close as cousins. Mrs. Patterson lived to see all of Hayes and Nora's children born, becoming a beloved grandmother figure to them, before passing peacefully in her sleep in 1889. As their children grew and the century turned from old to new, Hayes and Nora settled into the comfortable rhythm of a long marriage. They still made time for each other, still took evening rides together when they could, still fell asleep tangled together most nights. The passion of their early relationship matured into something deeper, a partnership and friendship that formed the foundation of everything they had built. On a February evening in 1901, 20 years after Hayes had found Nora in the snow, they sat together on their porch watching the sunset. The house behind them was full of noise and life. Their children grown now, but all home for Nathan's 18th birthday celebration. Nathan was talking about starting his own ranch. Grace was engaged to a fine young man from town. Robert was apprenticing with the blacksmith, and Sarah was still in school but already showing signs of wanting to be a teacher. "Can you believe it has been 20 years?" Nora asked, her hand in Hayes's. "Some days it feels like yesterday. Other days it feels like you have always been here." "I have always been here. At least, all the parts of me that matter have been. The woman I was before you found me, she died in that snow. You saved more than my life that night, Hayes. You saved me. You saved me too. I was dead inside after Martha died, just going through the motions. You brought me back to life, Nora. You gave me hope and purpose and love. You gave me this." He gestured at the house, at the sounds of their children laughing inside. This full, rich, beautiful life. I was just existing before you. You made me live again." Nora leaned her head on his shoulder, the same gesture she had made that first evening they talked about their feelings, sitting on these same porch steps. "We saved each other then. We built this life together, and I would not change a single thing. Neither would I." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the Texas sky turn from gold to pink to purple, the same sky that had brought snow and storm and changed both their lives forever. Inside, their children called for them to come see something, to settle some argument, to just be present in their lives the way Hayes and Nora always had been. In a moment they would go inside, would rejoin the noise and chaos and love of their family. But for now they sat together, two people who had found each other in the darkness and cold and built something warm and bright together. "I love you," Hayes said, the same words he had said thousands of times over the years. "I love you too," Nora replied, the same response she had given thousands of times, each time meaning it just as much as the first. They stood together, hands linked, and went inside to their family, to their home, to the life they had built from nothing more than a chance meeting in a snowstorm and the decision to open their hearts to love again. It was everything Hayes had never dared hope for after Martha died, everything Nora had thought lost when Nathaniel passed. They had found each other when both were at their lowest, and together they had built something lasting and true. The years continued to roll on as they always do, bringing joys and sorrows, births and deaths, triumphs and challenges. But through it all, Hayes and Nora faced everything together, partners in the truest sense. They grew old together on the ranch they both loved, watching their children have children of their own, seeing their family grow and spread across Texas. Nathan took over the ranch when Hayes finally decided to retire, proving himself a worthy successor, running the place with the same integrity and wisdom his father had shown. Grace and her husband settled nearby, giving Nora the joy of having a daughter close at hand. Robert became the finest blacksmith in the county, and Sarah became the teacher she dreamed of being, educating children in the one-room schoolhouse in Leno. Hayes and Nora spent their final years in contentment, still living in the ranch house Nathan now ran, still useful and needed by their family. They told their grandchildren stories about how they met, about the snowstorm and the near death and the slow building of love. The grandchildren never tired of hearing about how Grandpa had saved Grandma's life, how she had been his warmth and his light, how they had built everything from almost nothing. On a spring morning in 1915, Hayes woke to find Nora had passed peacefully in her sleep beside him. She was 77 years old, and they had been married for 33 years. The grief was crushing, but Hayes took comfort in knowing she had lived a long, full life, surrounded by love. He had given her that. They had given each other that. He lived another 2 years, long enough to see the world change in ways he could never have imagined when he was young. Automobiles appeared on the roads. Electricity came to Leno. The Wild West he had known transformed into something more civilized and modern. But the ranch remained, solid and enduring, a legacy of the love he and Nora had built. When Hayes died in 1917 at the age of 68, his children buried him beside Nora in the cemetery at the church where they had married. On the headstone they placed a simple inscription: Hayes Zimmerman, beloved husband and father, he found love in a snowstorm and built a legacy of warmth and light. The ranch stayed in the family for generations, passed down through Nathan's children and their children after that. But more than the land or the house or the cattle, what Hayes and Nora passed down was the story of their love, proof that even in the darkest moments, even when all seems lost, there is hope. That two lonely people can find each other and build something beautiful. That love, when it is real and true and fought for every single day, can transform everything. And so their story lived on, told and retold at family gatherings, an example of what was possible when two people opened their hearts to each other and refused to give up, no matter how hard things got. They started with nothing but a chance meeting in the snow and the courage to believe in tomorrow. They ended with everything that truly mattered: love, family, purpose, and a life lived fully and well together. In the end, that frozen February night in 1881, when Hayes found a starving girl in the snow and brought her home, did not just save Nora's life. It saved them both, giving two lonely, grieving people a second chance at happiness. And they took that chance with both hands and built something that lasted long after they were gone, a testament to the enduring power of love and second chances, and the simple human capacity for kindness. Their love story became legend in Llano, passed down through the generations, a reminder that heroes are not always found in grand gestures or dramatic moments. Sometimes heroes are just ordinary people doing what needs to be done, offering shelter to someone in need, giving work to someone with nothing, opening their heart to love when they thought they were done with love forever. Hayes Zimmerman was just a lonely rancher who found a girl starving in the snow. Nora Atwood was just a desperate woman who had lost everything. But together, they became each other's warmth and light, each other's reason to keep going, each other's happy ending. And that, in the end, was more than enough. It was everything.